When we study the Wild West, we run into a lot of badass characters. Heck Thomas, Billy the Kid, Jesse James, even the actors in Hollywood like John Wayne, Clint Eastwood, they're badasses. But one we haven't talked about and could be one of the most influential people of the Wild West just got a new premiere on Paramount Plus. That's Bass Reeves. Arguably the most successful lawman in Wild West history. So we're going to take a deep dive into Bass Reeves on this episode of Chronicles of the West. Born in 1838 to enslaved parents in Crawford County, Arkansas, Bass Reeves would go on to make history as the first U.S. deputy marshal west of the Mississippi River, becoming one of the most celebrated frontier heroes in American history. Bass, owned by a man named William Reeves, adopted his owner's surname, a common practice amongst slaves during that time. His first name was derived from his grandfather, Bass Washington. Reeves initially worked as a water boy and later a field hand alongside his parents. Around 1846, William Reeves relocated his operation and family and his slaves to Grayson County, Texas. Standing tall at 6'2", Bass Reeves possessed a courteous demeanor and a good sense of humor. George Reeves, William's son, became his valet, bodyguard, and companion. When the Civil War began, Texas aligned itself with the Confederacy, and George took Bass with him. During the Civil War years, Bass separated from Reeves' family, with accounts suggesting it was due to his dispute in a card game or his desire to escape after hearing about the freeing of slaves. Bass found refuge in Indian Territory, which is now Oklahoma, with the Seminole, Cherokee, and Creek Indians, learning their customs, languages, and tracking skills. He also honed his firearm skills, becoming a quick and accurate pistol shooter, although he considered himself only fair with a rifle, and was often barred from competitive turkey shoots. After being freed by the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863, Bass left Indian Territory, purchased land near Van Buren, Arkansas, and became a successful farmer and rancher. He married Nellie Jenny from Texas and raised 10 children on their homestead. During this period, oral history suggests that Reeves occasionally served as a scout and guide for the U.S. Deputy Marshals, conducting business in Indian Territory under the jurisdiction of the Van Buren Federal Court. Reeves' life as a content farmer changed when the Federal Western District Court was relocated to Fort Smith, Arkansas, and Isaac C. Parker was appointed as the judge. Parker appointed U.S. Marshal James F. Fagan to hire some 200 deputies to restore order in the lawless Indian Territory. Fagan recruited Reeves as a U.S. deputy due to his extensive knowledge of the area and his ability to speak several tribal languages. These deputies were tasked with cleaning up, quote, Indian Territory as per Judge Parker's orders. They said, bring him in alive or dead. Bass Reeves worked alongside legendary lawmen like Heck Thomas, Bud Ledbetter, and Bill Tillman. Some of those we've covered on this channel already. Covering the vast expanse of the United States Court at Fort Smith, which spans some 75,000 square miles. Despite his inability to read or write, Reeves' effectiveness in apprehending criminals was unhampered. Before each mission, he had someone read the warrants to him, memorizing their contents and distinguishing between the differences. He never failed to produce the correct warrant when required. Reeves was an imposing figure, was always seen riding a large white stallion, and earned a reputation for his courage and success in capturing or eliminating numerous outlaws in the territory. While typically dressing elegantly and wearing a large hat with polished boots, he was also skilled in disguise, often adopting different personas such as cowboy, farmer, gunslinger, or outlaw. He always carried 2 Colt pistols, holstered for a quick draw, and was ambidextrous, ensuring that his shots rarely missed the mark. Reeves would leave Fort Smith with a pocket full of warrants, returning months later with multiple outlaws in custody, charged with crimes ranging from bootlegging to murder. He earned substantial fees and rewards, making a significant profit before spending time with his family before then heading out again. The tales of his capture are filled with intrigue and courage. In one instance, Reeves pursued 2 outlaws in the Red River Valley near the Texas border. He gathered a posse and devised a plan, disguising himself as a tramp. Hiding his tools, which like his handcuffs, pistol, and badge, under his clothes, he arrived at the outlaw's mother's house wearing old shoes, dirty clothes, carrying a cane, and sporting a floppy hat with 3 bullet holes. Upon arriving, he told a fabricated story to the woman, who answered the door, gaining her sympathy. After being invited in for a meal, she shared information about her outlaw sons, suggesting that they actually team up. Pretending to be wary, she allowed him to stay longer. As night fell, Reeves heard a whistle from beyond the house. The woman went outside and responded with a whistle of her own. Soon, 2 riders arrived and engaged in a conversation with her. Afterwards, they all entered the house and the woman introduced her sons to Reeves. They discussed their crimes and decided to join forces. As the outlaws slept, Reeves watched them closely and, without waking them, handcuffed them. In the morning, he roused the outlaws, marched them out, and delivered them to the waiting posse. The outlaws were promptly handed over to the authorities, and Reeves collected a $5,000 reward. One of the highlights of Reeves' career was apprehending the notorious outlaw Bob Dozier, who was involved in a wide range of crimes, from cattle and horse rustling to bank and store robberies and murder and land swindles. Dozier had eluded the many lawmen until Reeves tracked him down in the Cherokee Nation and engaged in a gunfight, resulting in Dozier's death on December 20th of 1878. In 1887, Reeves faced charges of murder of posse cook, and his trial was presided over by Judge Isaac Parker. He was represented by U.S. State Attorney W.H.H. Clayton, a colleague and friend, and ultimately he was acquitted. In 1889, he was assigned to Paris, Texas. Reeves pursued the Tom Story gang of horse thieves. He surprised Tom Story with an arrest warrant, but Story drew his gun, prompting Reeves to act swiftly and shoot him dead. The rest of the gang disbanded and disappeared. Reeves arrested the notorious Seminole outlaw Greenleaf in 1890, a fugitive who had been on the run for 18 years and had murdered 7 people. In the same year, he pursued the famous Cherokee outlaw Ned Christie, although Christie managed to evade capture despite Reeves and his posse burning down Christie's cabin. In 1896, Reeves' wife passed away in Fort Smith, Arkansas, and he was subsequently transferred to the Muskogee Federal Court in Indian Territory. In 1900, he married again, this time to a woman named Winnie Sumter. One of the most challenging manhunts in Reeves' career was tracking down his own son in 1902. After delivering 2 prisoners to U.S. Marshal Leo Bennett in Muskogee, Oklahoma, Reeves received devastating news that his son, Benny, had been charged with murdering his wife in a fit of jealousy. Despite the reluctance of other deputies to accept the warrant, Reeves insisted on finding his son. 2 weeks later, he returned with his son, who was tried and sentenced to life in prison. After a petition by citizens in displaying exemplary behavior in prison, Benny Reeves was eventually pardoned and lived the rest of his life as a model citizen. Throughout his career, Bass Reeves was known for his unflinching courage and commitment to duty, with a reputation for never showing fear under any circumstance. In 1907, state agencies took over law enforcement, ending Reeves' tenure as a deputy marshal. He then became a patrolman with the Muskogee, Oklahoma Police Department, where no crimes were reported on his beat during his 2-year service. Reeves' career came to an end in 1909 due to his diagnosis with Bright's disease. He passed away on January 12th of 1910 and was buried in the agency cemetery at Muskogee, Oklahoma, although the exact location of the grave remains unmarked and on private property. Bass Reeves' obituary described him as an absolutely fearless and knowing no master but duty. Over his 35-year career as deputy marshal, he earned a well-deserved place in history for his effectiveness in taming the lawless Indian Territory, apprehending more than 3,000 outlaws, and ensuring justice was served. Despite taking the lives of 14 men during his service, Reeves maintained that he only shot when it was necessary to protect his life or to fulfill his duty. The Three Guardsmen. This group of incredibly important lawmen was made up of Christian Madsen, William Pete Tillman Jr., and the leader with arguably the coolest nickname I've ever heard, Henry Heck Thomas. These three men were U.S. Marshals who had been given the task of taming the wild lands of Oklahoma in the early 1890s. Not only did this trio of lawmen tame the Oklahoma plains, they were responsible for ending one of the most famous outlaw games of the Old West, the Doolin Dalton Gang. The three men were also known as being unfazed in their pursuit of outlaws. Ignoring bad weather and known for their tracking abilities, the three lawmen were given the name Three Guardsmen by the outlaws they were after. We discussed this shootout in another video, but Heck Thomas was the reason that the Dalton gang attempted to rob two banks at the same time during their demise in Coffeyville, Kansas. Emmett Dalton, the only member of the Dalton gang who survived the massacre at Coffeyville, specifically said that Heck Thomas was the reason for the decision. The Three Guardsmen were really made famous for their methodical and relentless pursuit of the Doolin Gang. The Three Guardsmen found the Doolin Gang hiding out in Ingalls, Oklahoma, and a shootout broke loose. 3 deputies and 2 civilians were killed while only 1 outlaw was captured. Because of this failure, the Three Guardsmen were tasked to abandon all other responsibilities to pursue the Doolin Gang full-time. The trio tracked down Bill Doolin in Eureka Springs, Arkansas, when Tillman dressed as a preacher with a gun under his jacket. He surprised Doolin at a spa while he was there for a foot injury. After 6 months in prison, Bill Doolin escaped prison and made his way back to his wife's father's house in Lawson, Oklahoma. But Heck Thomas was there waiting with his fellow marshals and ordered for Bill Doolin to surrender. Doolin answered with gunfire and was shot dead by Heck Thomas. Chris Madsen led a posse that killed Doolin gang members Dynamite Dick Clifton and Richard Little Dick West. Tillman was responsible for the death of Little Bill Radler. The rest of the gang was slowly captured or killed by the Three Guardsmen. Heck Thomas went on to become chief of police in Lawton, Oklahoma, and died in 1912. Bill Tillman was elected to the Oklahoma State Senate. In 1924, Tillman was murdered by a man named Wiley Lynn while he was serving as town marshal for Cromwell, Oklahoma. 1 month after Tillman's death, the town of Cromwell was entirely burned to the ground. No building was left standing. Chris Madsen, the now last surviving member of the Three Guardsmen, is thought to be the one responsible for the arson. There was never an investigation conducted and the town of Cromwell never recovered. Chris Madsen himself died in 1944 at the ripe age of 93. The Three Guardsmen were said to have killed or captured over 300 outlaws during their time in Oklahoma. Dave Allison. William Davis Allison, also known as Dave Allison, was born in Ohio in 1861. He began his lifetime career as a lawman at the young age of 27. He moved to Texas and was elected the sheriff of Midland. With this appointment, he became the youngest sheriff of the Lone Star State. During his time there, he was coined as being the most efficient lawman in all of Texas. After serving 6 terms as sheriff in Midland, he moved to Arizona to join the Arizona Rangers. He reportedly killed the famous outlaw Three Finger Jack after a train robbery in Fairbank, Arizona. He also captured the outlaw Owen Brothers and Tom Bravo Juan Bowes. Dave Allison went on to serve with the Texas Rangers, the Roswell, New Mexico Chief of Police, and a bodyguard for mining magnate Bill Green during mining strikes in Mexico. Allison also led the posse that killed Mexican revolutionary turned outlaw Pascual Orizarco. The famous American general George S. Patton said that Dave Allison is, quote, the most noted gunman here in Texas. Dave Allison was killed in the line of duty in 1923 when he and another detective, Horace Robertson, were ambushed at the Gaines Hotel in Seminole, Texas by infamous cattle rustlers Hill Loftus and Milton Good. It is said that with the death of Dave Allison came the end of the Texas frontier era. Bat Masterson. William Barclay Masterson was born in 1853 in Quebec, Canada. His family moved him around New York, Illinois, and landed near Wichita, Kansas in 1871. During his childhood years, he became very efficient with a firearm during his time hunting buffalo. When Bat was 18, he went on a buffalo hunt with his older brother Ed. They camped along the Salt Fork River in Comanche and Barber counties in Kansas when they ran into some hunters that would become legends of the Wild West. They were famous buffalo hunters Billy Dixon, Tom Nixon, who shot 120 buffalo in 40 minutes and set a record for killing 3,200 buffalo in 35 days, and someone all of us Western fans should be very familiar with, a man named Wyatt Earp. The Masterson brothers kept pushing into Native American territory in pursuit of buffalo and ended up establishing a large complex in the panhandle of Texas called Adobe Walls. It became an outpost that supported the huge influx of buffalo hunters. As expected, the Native Americans took this as a threat to their existence and led an attack on the small outpost. A force of 700 Comanche, Cheyenne, Kiowa, and Arapaho warriors attacked the camp on June 27th of 1874. 28 men, including Bat Masterson and Billy Dixon, took refuge in 2 different stores and the saloon. Although severely outnumbered, the hunters had superior weaponry and held off the attack for 4 days straight. Word got out and 100 men came to reinforce the post, which forced the Native Americans to retreat. An estimated 70 Native Americans were killed, while 4 men defending the Adobe Walls were killed. Because of this, an expedition was started out to the Texas Panhandle and the Red River War against the Native Americans there began. Bat Masterson helped as a scout, but he went back to buffalo hunting and became a faro dealer. During his time as a dealer, he got into an argument with a man named Sergeant Melvin King over a card game and a woman named Molly Brennan. Firearms were drawn and Masterson shot Sergeant King dead. King did manage to fire at Masterson, but the bullet went through Molly Brennan before hitting him. Molly Brennan died from this wound, and the injury to Masterson caused him to walk with a limp for the rest of his life. After Bat Masterson healed from his injuries, he headed to Dodge City, Kansas to become a lawman, and Bat saw great success in his time there. He was elected sheriff in 1877, and when he took office in 1878, he immediately went to work. He stopped a train robbery in Kinsley, Kansas in the same month he took office. By April of 1878, Bat's brother Ed had become city marshal and got into an altercation with a man named Jack Wagner. After an altercation of the ordinance about carrying a firearm, Jack Wagner shot Ed Masterson in the back, mortally wounding him. Ed Masterson lived long enough to shoot Jack Wagner back, which was also fatal. This event led to a man named Charlie Bassett to be appointed to city marshal, and his assistant marshal? None other than Bat's old hunting buddy and Wild West royalty, Wyatt Earp. Bat Masterson would also stop the assassination attempts on the Dodge City mayor by a man named Spike Kennedy. On the second attempt, Kennedy killed a woman in the mayor's room and ran from town. Bat Masterson organized a posse with Charles Bassett, Wyatt Earp, and our old friend from the Three Guardsmen, Bill Tillman, along with William Duffy. They caught up to him the same day of the shooting and shot his horse from beneath him. Even though he was captured, Spike Kennedy was acquitted with a lack of evidence and released. Masterson was then appointed as Deputy U.S. Marshal and arrested a man named Dutch Henry Bourne, who was one of the biggest horse thieves in all of the American West at the time. The next month, Masterson was put in charge of bringing Cheyenne prisoners to stand trial after a fall raid. The state of Kansas charged them with 40 murders, and this would be identified later in history as the last Native American raid in Kansas. Masterson was then tasked with protecting the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railroad during a dispute with a rival company, the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad, over the rights through the Royal Gorge in Colorado. Bat enlisted Doc Holliday, Dirty Dave, Mysterious Dave Mather, Ben Thompson, and about 70 others to help with his new endeavor. This would go on to be known as the Royal Gorge War. Although they saw success, the courts ruled in favor of the Denver-Rio Grande Railroad, and Bat had to concede. Masterson would move on to become a professional gambler all over the Wild West. By 1893, he was requested to go to New York City to help a bodyguard for a prominent man named George Gould. He would actually go on to become a sports writer for the New York Morning Telegraph. In 1905, Bat was appointed as a U.S. Marshal for the Southern District of New York until 1909. Bat Masterson would continue to write until his death in 1921. He died of a heart attack while working at his newspaper desk at the age of 67.